Hey everybody, welcome to lesson number 13 for the Stylized Weapons class. In this lesson, we're going to be in Marmoset Toolbag, and we're going to start to render out the final sort of screenshot and the turntable image sequence. So what we're going to do is we're going to take in our final mesh and our final textures that we created in Photoshop and 3D Code. So the first thing I'm going to go and do is go to File, Import Mesh. I'm going to find our final mesh, or our final model. Now this model, this should be that final mesh that we brought into 3D Code for the final sort of color map that we were working on. So whatever that model was at that stage, that was kind of final, where maybe it was tessellated, and it definitely has the UVs. That is that final model you want to use here. So once that is loaded in, the next thing I usually do is I create the shader that we're going to be using for this. In this case, right now we got default applied, but we are going to want to be using the Dota 2 template because of the specular map that we created. We're definitely going to want to use the Dota 2 template. So right here with this little triangle and the horizontal bars, when I click on this, I can get a Dota 2 template option. The first thing I do is I'm going to click on it and then click and drag and drop it onto the mesh, and it'll then apply that there. Another quick thing before I kind of go into more with the rest of those settings, I want to go to Sky, and I want to turn off in this mode right here, backdrop mode. I'm going to turn off blurred sky and just put on color. It's going to be a little distracting. I know at least for some more stylized game weapons, I tend to not use the blurred background in the actual renders. I tend to just do a colored background, and this color is being determined by this color right there. Okay, so now back to the shader. There's all these different sort of sections that are kind of pulled out. So first one, surface, which is the normal map. For this, we're going to sort of just plug in that final normal map that we created. So I'm going to go to File and Texture Maps. I'm going to click on Normal Final. For this, we definitely want to have scale and bias checked on, like so. I believe it's only for HDR floating, like normal maps, that you ever want to have it checked off. So for almost every instance, definitely check that on. We are not going to be flipping X, Y, or Z. And we are not going to be doing object space. A lot of that was determined basically in X normal. And then sort of speaking of normal maps and X normal, when we click on this mesh right here, in this section, you're going to see tangent space option right here. And you want to basically choose whichever sort of environment you baked the normal map out of, or even the AO map, the diffuse map kind of thing. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and check X normal. It's not a huge difference necessarily, but it can be some subtle sort of differences in how the normal map is sort of displayed. Next thing is albedo, which is basically the same thing as diffuse. And again, our color map right here, which is the first option right there, this is going to be that diffuser color map that we finalized in 3D Code. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the checker box and choose color final. We should be all set for that. Now it's going to look really weird at first, and that's because we don't have the specular map applied. And we apply that into the reflectivity section right here, which has Dota 2 specular. So right here in Mask 2, this checker box, I'm going to click on this. I'm going to choose specular final. So you can already see that this is kind of starting to come together, but there's a couple things that we still definitely are going to want to do. First thing I'm going to want to do is definitely like this. So I'm going to turn off sky first and foremost, and then I'm going to go to scene, new light. I'm going to kind of start to move this around. And the other thing is that instead of omni, I'm going to want this to be directional. You can kind of see at first, it might be a little confusing because this side is being lit, and you can see the light right here. The reason why is that this white arrow right here, that's actually determining where this light is pointing to. So it's a green right here. I'm going to move this around. The next thing I'm definitely going to want to do is I'm going to want to check cast shadows. And you can see that now this thing is casting shadows, but it's a little odd. You want to make sure that you're maybe a little specific with where you're casting it. And I definitely want these stones to kind of cast a shadow right there on the main stone piece. So I'm going to move this around a little bit. Rotate this again like so. And that should be all good to go. Next thing I can do is definitely bring the brightness up at least a little bit like so. And I can also start to change some of the colors of these lights. Now, before I get into the colors of the lights, I'm going to first change it to sky map. So I'm going to bring this back on. And for the skylight, I tend to choose something that kind of makes sense for the asset, for the weapon. So for this weapon, It's kind of a Mystic Staff. It's almost kind of more of like an ice Mystic Staff. It's got a lot of cool colors to it. So either you can have your own HDR image sort of created, and then you sort of load it up there. But for this, for presets, I'm going to go ahead and select Canada Glacier. It's going to basically work out for us. So brightness, I'm going to leave that as 1. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of play around with the rotation. And as I'm rotating this around, I kind of really like this nice little sheen right here. So I'm going to sort of keep it maybe right there. So kind of nice. And next thing I'm going to do is go to this color, this background color. I want this weapon to definitely kind of stand out even a little bit more than it currently is. So I'm going to darken this background quite a bit. Maybe something like this. And another subtle thing I definitely want to do is I want to go to main camera, and I want a little vignette on this. Really kind of make this really kind of start to pop. So I'm going to bring the strength up quite a bit. You can see that these corners are trying to darken. You can play around with the softness as well. Just kind of keep fooling around with both of these until you get something that you like. Again, you can choose the color. Maybe instead of a black, because you really kind of want to play around with how these things are being colored. You know, you don't in general want blacks to just be black. You want some color in it. You want to choose something that, because these are all blues, maybe something of bluish purple like this. There's still a little bit of color in there. There, that should be good. Next, I told you we're going to start to sort of play around with the color with the lighting. So because this is more of like a blue ice environment, instead of a white light, I think I'm going to actually have this be like a light bluish green light. By the way, this column right here, this slider, this is the saturation, this is the value. So I'm going to make this be at least a little bit of saturation. I definitely want this to be basically white, so I'm not going to play around with that, but I'm going to do something like this and that. That should be good. And I'm going to sort of copy this, and I'm going to paste it into over here. So I'm going to select it all and copy it. And now for the rim light and the specular light, I'm going to choose this box right here, and I'm going to paste that in. And choose this one right here, and I'm going to paste that in as well, and then hit OK. So now the lights everywhere, it kind of all makes sense with this kind of ice environment, and it kind of just, it makes sense in general for this asset. I'm going to hit space on the keyboard right away, just so I can see that asset and find the nice angle. I kind of like this angle because I'm getting a little bit of that sheen right there. Still getting a little bit of that rim light. This is good for a general sort of snapshot angle. And yeah, that should basically be all. That should be set. Another quick thing I want to do for render, I like to use the watermark. You know, Marmoset, they do a good job. I like to kind of show it off. The other thing is for lighting, I'll go ahead and check these on as well. This little subtle thing. Besides that, that should all basically be set. Next thing we need to do is the turntable animation. You can feel free to do a turntable for whichever you like. I tend to either do camera or scene, just kind of show you what the difference is. We'll do camera first, kind of show you that. So in this instance, the camera itself is turning around everything, so the sky or the light is not moving. Or what you can do is, and what I'm going to do for this instance, I'm going to do 30 right here, and I'm going to just turn the scene around. You can see it kind of changing like so. That's kind of, I would say in general, I do a scene turntable. So you've got that all set up, and you can feel free to make this a little bit quicker if you'd like. But then really the next thing we need to do is just go to capture and start doing those settings. One quick thing I should also point out is that in this instance, I just did one directional light. You can definitely do like a 3-point lighting setup. You can do some pretty sort of elaborate settings to get your rim light to really affect more areas. In this case, I just did a really sort of simple setup, but a lot of times it's going to be even better and stronger to do like a 3-point setup. And I believe Marmoset, they on their site, they've got some pretty good documentation in terms of doing some good sort of lighting setups. So I would feel free to sort of check that out. But in this instance, I tended to just do, I'm just doing a really kind of quick sort of simple lighting setup. Again, now for capture, first thing you want to check out is settings. For this, I'm going to do a 1920 by 1080 with height. Sampling, I try to keep that fairly high. I would say definitely go above at least 416. You don't need to go necessarily higher than that. That's just a sampling quality, basically how sort of it's going to determine basically in ways, I guess, like the resolution and how fine the details are kind of being captured, kind of thing. For the format, I tend to do PNG, but you can do anything else if you prefer. And again, rotation, we got scene, we got clockwise, frame rate of 30, that works. And then duration. Duration of 1, that's going to be a little too short for an image sequence, so I'm going to put this up to about a 5. And you as you're kind of figuring this out, maybe you'll find that you need a little bit more time, a little less time. Maybe if in your turntable you want to show the wireframe in certain times, maybe you are going to want the duration to be a little bit longer, or maybe if you're combining this with other kind of videos at certain sort of points in time, you can sort of combine one short video with another short video, so that at one point it's just turning around, one point it's doing a wireframe, one point it's showing you just a specular map, whichever you'd kind of prefer. I'm going to turn off wireframe, at least for now, but I'm definitely going to have the duration at about 5. Another quick thing I like to do before I do a turntable, I like to do image and open. That's just going to give us a quick snapshot so we can determine whether or not we like this final kind of format. And yeah, this is kind of working for me. I know it's a little wide. Maybe if I was just doing a portfolio image, I wouldn't want it to be this wide for sure. But again, you can also alter this in Photoshop however you need to. If this is going to be a final image, you definitely sort of keep this as is and then go into Photoshop and tweak it quite a bit if you need to crop it, things like that. But that should basically work. So then all we really need to do is click on Turntable, and it will start rendering out an image sequence. Now this is important to kind of consider. This is going to render out an image sequence, a sequence of PNG images. It's not going to actually render out a video. And so from here, what we now need to do is basically go into After Effects and take that image sequence and then render it out as a video. One quick thing I want to talk about while that's kind of rendering is here in Marmoset with this Dodo 2 template, I just used the neural map, the color map, and the specular map. I didn't worry about the detail map, Vernell map, any of that kind of stuff. But definitely, I would feel free to check that out. I know Valve, Dodo 2, they've got some pretty good documentation in terms of setting that out setting that up so that it really sort of conforms with what they need, what they're kind of looking for. I know for my personal work and for a lot of my freelance work, I tend to only need to do maybe more of like a neural map, a color map, and a specular map. But there's some pretty cool things you can do with this Dodo 2 shader. It's a pretty powerful shader. I really, really like it. So I would definitely check out the other sort of masks that you can do with that as well. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this out. And now we're in Adobe After Effects, and I'm just going to kind of quickly show you what you can do to render this out as a video now. So what you can do is when you right-click in this section right here, you can go to Import File, or you can also click on Control-I. I usually just do the shortcut Control-I. And then I find wherever that sort of folder is with that image sequence, and I can click on the first image, and this automatically should show a PNG sequence or JPEG sequence, whatever sequence, whatever file type you sort of saved it out as. If it doesn't show up, definitely check that on and make sure you're in the right folder with all the different images. Another quick thing to kind of mention, it seems like Marmoset by default, when you're rendering out a snapshot or you're rendering out the turntable image sequence, you'll save it to your desktop. So if you don't quite know where it's saved to right off the bat, definitely just search your desktop. It should be there. You can go ahead and sort of copy or cut and paste that folder into wherever it needs to go afterwards. So I'm going to select. All you have to do is select the first image, and it'll automatically select all the other images. So I'm going to go ahead and open. You can verify this because right now it says 000 to 149. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move this over here to this sort of section. And to kind of test this out, I can hit the space bar, and it'll start to just kind of render this out really quick. This green right here, that's basically it's chugging away to figure out all the different frames, all the different frames in this entire file. Once it does that, you should be able to hit the space bar, and it should be a clean play like so. And yeah, that definitely works for us. That's going to be a pretty good sort of turntable sort of video for us. I'm going to take this composition. The composition has like the red and green right here. I'm going to drag and drop it into our render queue. A couple things in best settings. When you click on that, you can change the general quality, the resolution. You can change the frame rate. It's at 30 from Marmoset. You can change the start and end frames. In lossless right here, the output mode. This is where you can determine, maybe instead you would prefer for this to be, instead of AVI, you want it to be MPEG-4, whichever you like it to be. I tend to do, I would say in general I tend to do AVI. So I'll have it be AVI, and then right here for output, you can change this to wherever you need to. I'm going to just make this turntable 2. Find out wherever you need to save it to. And nothing's happened yet because you actually have to hit render right here. So when you hit render, it's going to actually start to render this out as that AVI video. And it shouldn't take too long. After Effects is usually pretty darn quick about this kind of stuff. You see that it is basically done. You'll hear a ding when it is done. There we go. It's all set. So the next thing I can do is I can go here. I can click on this. I like to use, there's a bunch of other video players you can use. Let me see. I'm not sure which one's the best necessarily. I'll try out Windows Media Player. I like to use either Windows Media Player or sometimes even QuickTime tends to be pretty good. Now it might struggle in some areas. I know my computer is also still rendering out that image sequence, but you should basically get the idea. I've got looping on, so it should loop immediately between it. But yeah, this is showing you that this video file that you can now basically use in your demo reel kind of thing. I'm also going to open this up in QuickTime because I believe in general it tends to play a little bit better in QuickTime. So maybe that might end up being your default version. The other thing is that maybe you'll get a better playback with MP4 instead. I believe MP4s aren't quite as large, but it's not a huge deal. I don't think these files are really that big as well. So QuickTime is coming up. I'm going to sort of expand this out. The first playthrough will probably be a little choppy, but then usually after the first playthrough, it tends to kind of have a clear cache for it. And yeah, you can see this tends to be it stopped a little bit because there's a lot of things going on with my computer, but QuickTime tends to be a little bit sort of cleaner. Alright, so that is it for making the video and for rendering this all out from Marmoset. And that actually is it for the class. So in this class, we went over the concept, we analyzed the concept, we made the low poly model, we scoped all the details in ZBrush, we baked out the diffuse and ambient occlusion map in XNormal, then we finalized the diffuse or color map in 3D Code, then we made the specular map in Photoshop, then we kind of brought it all together into Marmoset, we lit it, we rendered it, we made a turntable, and I did that quick little extra step of showing you how to turn that turntable image sequence into a video. But yeah, that's it for the class. Hopefully you are getting something out of this. Hopefully you can make some really cool weapons now. And there's going to be one more video where I kind of just go over the assignment, the assignment parameters. I'll try to keep it fairly open though for you guys. And yeah, I can't wait to see what kind of weapons you guys make. Thank you.